So I'm going to talk about something that I'm going to call impact staking because I don't know if there's a term. And let's see if we can project this. All right. So I want to talk about, so staking happened in Ethereum. I think it's one of the biggest and most transformational things happening in blockchain these years. And I want to come back to an idea that Prada and I spoke about almost 2 years ago. And it's this new primitive, potentially, of using staking for something that's not just security and not just getting economic rewards, but actually finding new models of how this can be a net positive for the ecosystem. So we've all seen Bitcoin is sound like gold. There's a limited supply. It's very monetarily sound. And Ethereum, there's this meme of it's ultra sound. Because we have 800,000 ETH issued since the merge. But we have more than that burned. And what you have is these economics that kind of work, right? It's one of the first experiments in crypto that has this positive yield, and is one of the largest at doing that. And thanks to that, we are achieving what you could say is monetary sustainability or even deflation. And that's really evident when you compare that with Bitcoin, which keeps this predictable schedule. So they don't need to be the same. It's good that they're different. But what I want to question is whether, is that what we want to be optimizing for? Are we building all this to optimize for deflation? Is this like the ultimate goal in security, in economics? Is it that ETH goes to 10,000? Are there other things that we could be optimizing for? And I want to kind of look at this as a monetary economic system. So we have, on one hand, ETH issuance. So you could think, if the economy is this kind of sink, water sink, the ETH issuance would be, what is that parameter? What are we paying for security? Because today we're paying validators, right? And what you do is you open this faucet and you say, look, we're going to fund validators because we need them. We need to create blocks and do transactions. But that water starts going. And if we wouldn't take it out, it would start overflowing with inflation. So what we do is we say, okay, there's this great idea, let's burn the transaction fees. And now we have this kind of ongoing tax or revenue analogy. So now you have something going out, something coming in. But because now ETH is deflationary, what we have is that we're kind of cycling, which is effective, but it's kind of one dimension. This is good that money is circulating, because if it wouldn't circulate, what we would do is I would have an ETH and I would just wait, because every year I would have more and more value. But what we want is not that. We want to create an economy. We want people to transact, to transfer value, to kind of think of how to secure it, to allocate it to projects that can do something positive with it. And that's why we have these EIPs, which are a little bit our monetary policy, right? Like every time we say, okay, we're going to change the amount of rewards that we give, we're going to change the slashing, we're going to change this reward curve. And what that is a kind of consensus that we reach to say, how are we going to direct this economy? So if Bitcoin is cloud gold, are we a kind of cloud nation? Because if you think about it, we are a little bit this distributed society. We don't live in one country, but we have a lot in common. We also have commons. So if we're a nation, how should we think about this as a framework? And the problem with when things don't move in the economy is you get stagnation, and you end up with a dirty pool that nobody wants to jump into because it hasn't changed for years. And good things happen when value can flow. And if value is the ability to create things, to have this potential energy, then a good economy should be like a river. It should be like creating life everywhere it goes, and bringing things and funding projects, initiatives, people. So if we're trying to build a nation, the best thing we can do is ask our civilization, if anyone's played kind of technology tree, and think, okay, where do we come from? So Ethereum has been built on the principles of being open, of being trustless, resilient, and neutral. And that might sound like some city-states that made that their kind of competitive advantage through history. And what we're doing well so far is we have things like trustless, open, resilient, neutral custody. Today, you can have ETH, and it's very hard for anybody to take them away. Just ETH would be a bit boring, so we also have contracts that can do like logic and can kind of create arbitrary behavior. And we need to kind of connect everything we're building. So we already have really good tools to do discussions, to do trade. Like Denison was saying, I feel like communities are still something that we need to keep improving because we have the building blocks, but we sometimes don't know the right models of how to use them. And we're also working on exciting things like privacy, identity, maybe arbitration in online systems. But what are we not building if we're a nation? There's a lot more. There could be like, how do we connect to real world assets? Are we working for inclusion in the right way? Do we want to provide things like funding for common goods? Do we need to consider welfare in 10, 50 years? If all the people in this ecosystem are kind of long-term, maybe, you know, getting older, getting sick, needing some kind of social support. Now, for the first time, we're also having really big debates of when you follow economic incentives, things end up centralizing. And there's this big LIDO debate, for example. And the problem is because we don't have regulators who can step in, we need to find other alternatives. But when we talk about all this, these are institutions, and institutions need funding, and we don't have the sources of funding. So monetary policy alone can lead to a tragedy of the common. And I think we need to keep experimenting with new social and funding models. Question is, where does that come from? And I feel like we've been given this new world with all these advantages of neutrality. And now we have to decide what do we make of it and how do we think for the next 10, 50, 100 years. And the decisions we make today are what's going to set this kind of possibility. So we've been thinking about monetary in inflation, deflation, and I feel like that's going only in one dimension, where we think, okay, do I get more value now or do I get less value now? But that's short-sighted because in economy, anytime you can make a choice to invest on something now to create more value in the future. So I don't know if that's the right curve, but imagine we have a curve like this for utility and that we can say, I will take less present value now and I will maximize future value. And of course, that's going to be a very difficult decision. But if there is this scale where we can choose to maybe capture a little bit less value as individuals now in the pursuit of like creating a larger value in the future, then you know, that would be a positive sum game. And we should all be engaging in this. We should find ways to engage in it. So I would suggest to start going away from just monetary maximalism to kind of this North Star where we're thinking about sustainability. Because in many cases, small contributions can have a big impact. And anytime we can find that, we should be doing it. It would be stupid not to do it. So yeah, we come back to the question, how do we fund the commons if the commons are good and they're a net positive? And I just put these few models, but maybe we can talk about it. But Vinay just mentioned free open source software fees. And you could have a model that's semi-private. It's unclear a little bit how that would work. It could be complex with a lot of different people that you're licensing from. So I haven't really seen that model. We have seen the model of foundations, where different protocols say, okay, this is the foundation, we're going to do public goods, but it has the downside that they're limited, that they end up still centralized because it's the initial, right? It's the beginning of a protocol. The alternatives to that, longer term, are do we go for donations? Donations are a bit difficult because it's painful. You have to like do away with your money and give it to something else. It can also be very volatile. I'm sure the amount of donations we saw during the bull market is very different from what we're seeing today. So it's hard to make something sustainable, but it is opt-in. So this is a good model. If we go for a model for taxation, it's also painful, like every time somebody's confiscating some of your wealth, but it is predictable, and it could be fair if we get all taxed in a predictable way. But in impact staking, the model I want to propose is something that's potentially win-win, where users could tap into the rewards from Ethereum to capture a lot of those, but also donate the other part, like a little part, to these public good fundings that will maximize the value of their stake in the future. I think what I like about it is that it is very predictable, right? Like staking, because it comes from that positive yield in Ethereum, and it's also opt-in. So yeah, the basic idea is that we have a user, you can stake your ETH in whatever primitive this ends up being. You get the ETH rewards, but you donate a part of those rewards to public goods. So it's a very simple idea, but the question is, how do we implement this? So I think it gives us this new design space, and this is the last slide, of if we want something like this, I feel like there is a very real possibility that this is net positive for the ecosystem and the user. But the question is, how do we do it? Do we do it in an application? Do we move it to the protocol? How do we create these win-win models for users to make sure that everybody's engaging and not like a couple people? And how do you make those decisions on allocations for funds? Because if we don't have a central government and we're having more like, are we looking for entities for each user to decide? So yeah, this is just some food for thought, but I feel like it could be an exciting thing. And we're in a good time to be talking about it. Yeah, and I still have more time. So what do you all think?
Sounds great.
We have some, I saw a few hands. Denison, sorry? Yes?
If you do so you stake, you get some rewards, and part of that reward goes to like public goods of some sort. Isn't that a little bit of the donation taxation scheme? Because like it could have been your money, but it goes to someone else. Although it would be kind of interesting if you didn't get that money regardless, right? Like so some portion of the staking rewards by default was just going to someone else. But then would the really large actors or the really like rational actors think, well, long term that means less deflation and less value being captured for me long term? Like how do you think you would deal with that sort of like trade-off there?
Yeah, really good question. So I think the term that some people are using is self-taxation. So you choose to tax yourself, not on the principle, but on part of your rewards. But yeah, like how do you get people to participate? If you do it in the application layer, we have plenty of applications. Like Prada and Franjo before, we're saying a lot of people delegate ETH. So if every ETH, like liquid staking provider or delegator or staking provider, adopts a model like this, then it would be very easy to participate because it would be like if every bank in the world had a kind of ESG or public goods program, right? So this is already kind of being suggested in the traditional system, but there's always this possibility to say, well, I'll just take the other one and keep the yield. The other option is there are protocol level solutions we could adopt. We are now burning everything, but we could do things like maybe not burning, maybe have something or donate or burn kind of system where either you're just burning it and it's max deflationary, or you're allocating it somewhere else. So this will connect a little bit to the next talk, but I think it's a really interesting question. Should we move on or more questions? We done? We're out of time. Okay. So.